You know, I often talk about Xenoblade's characters quite a lot, but normally those discussions are reserved for the triumphant heroes if the Dramatis Personae videos are anything to go off of. However, what I believe is one of Xenoblade's best executed aspects is how excellent the Rogues Gallery is. The entries cover such a wide range of archetypes and personalities, with the complexity of someone like Egil to the boisterous, hammy nature of Malos, and most of them organically fit into the narrative each game is trying to tell. There are very few I could say I actually despise. Hey, Galgar! What are you doing over there? No, it's past your bedtime, get the fuck. When it comes to Xenoblade's villains, I usually hear plenty of discourse and praise surrounding Malos and Egil, but my favorite is actually the first one we're introduced to in the Xenoblade Chronicles series, Metalface. And no, your eyes did not deceive you, I did indeed put him in my top 10 characters and above both Rex and Nia.
Really?
What the hell is that? What the? Is that a fork?
No one likes so lame!
Guys! Yo, get off my lawn!
You don't even live there!
What? The fuck are you? Shit.
Several months ago, I held a poll on the channel asking who was everyone's favorite villain from the numbered titles, and the results were pretty interesting. Malos won very convincingly, with Egil coming in second place, which lined up pretty accurately with my experience in the community. But Metalface took third place, and that kinda shocked me. Perhaps it's because the members of the fanbase I normally converse with do not share the same adoration I do for this trash-talking metal man, but I honestly expected Jin and even a Malphus to beat him out. Granted, I can't say this poll was perfectly executed or representative of the entire community, but you guys are cool, so it's fine in my books. Although I've touched upon his character in previous videos, I felt compelled to make a full video dedicated to Metalface, explaining why I love his character and believe it works so well within the narrative of Xenoblade Chronicles. This very well could have been a Dramatis Personae episode, but I wanted to go beyond the format I normally do with that series and keep the conversation more casual in nature. Anyways, let's kick this off with an examination of who Metalface is in addition to how his personality is complemented by his design. Originating from a former colony destroyed in the Mechon attacks, Mumkhar was a Ham soldier that fought alongside Dunban in countless battles, even saving his life on several occasions. But it wasn't his appearance in the prologue that made him so memorable to fans of the series. It was what he would eventually become, the villainous Metalface. Concerning immediate impressions, Metalface is absolutely terrifying in both design and concept. This massive humanoid machine that looms over not only the Hams, but the other Mechon reeks of intimidation. He has two major appearances, but it's the first design which I believe captures the essence of his character and incorporates a collection of rather unsettling visual cues. There are the obvious gargantuan claws, but also the thin spinal piece bridging his torso, the ribcage pattern etched into his upper body, and the skull-like face, distinguishing itself with what look like stitches attempting to sew shut his permanently smiling mouth. His face is also the only part of his body that is silver in coloring, giving more credence to his name and making it a point of focus for the player amidst the sea of black and gold composing his body, which in turn calls attention to all of his various expressions. His introduction scene in the assault on Colony 9 is also a brilliant joint effort from the developers and art team, as the dim lighting present, whether it's day or night, allow his silhouette to blend with the background and permit the red glow lining his armor and illuminating his piercing eyes to stand out even more as they cleave through his surroundings. He also has this really awesome Zekrom-like jet booster on his back, which gets utilized when he decides he wants to be a freaking Transformer. The second design is rather similar, but trades out some of these skeletal features for bulk, and it's not a bad alternative, yet one of the other reasons I adore the first incarnation is because of what's in his name. Face. Metalface's construction is unique to the standard hinged lower jaw present in other face Mechon, alongside his second incarnation, and that allows for a wider range of expression, further establishing his character. If there is one thing Metalface loves doing, it's talking shit. After Mumkhar comes into possession of this destructive body, this man gains the confidence of Vegeta before getting tossed on his neck by whatever villain the song's named after. The moment in the narrative Metalface is mostly known for and what gave him the reputation he has is when he kills Fiora in the game's opening hours. But this cutscene named Lost does an impeccable job at grabbing hold of the player's attention early on and giving them a reason to embark on this grand journey for revenge, practically defying tropes of the JRPG genre. I still have more to say with regards to Metalface in this moment, but we'll get back to that. Regardless, Metalface has not only taken Fiora's life, but emotionally wounded her brother Dunban and Shulk. So you spend maybe 10 more hours tracking this fiend down, and you don't find him. He finds you. And let me point out that the only reason he showed up is to talk crap and remind Shulk about how he stabbed his childhood friend and love interest. Like, that has to be one of the coldest things a villain could possibly do. Earlier, I mentioned that Metalface's expressiveness was a key component to his character, and it's due to how well it blends with his smack talk. This particular cutscene is exemplary of this principle, with minutia like when Ryan makes a snide comment about how Metalface can talk, to which he responds with a dismissive,
"I can talk all right,"
coupled with a conceited half shrug, kinda similar to what Shulk does in his Shulk Time taunt. Or how about when he channels his inner Xehanort and wiggles his fingers and tilts his head in this unsettling way to taunt Shulk even further? Oh, and how about when he reels back when he's laughing about slicing through Fiora? Like I said, I could keep rambling about the intricacies behind his voice in animations and how they align to construct this utterly detestable, yet strangely alluring villain who you hate to love. But a lot of these moments are simply something that needs to be experienced firsthand. Speaking of the voice work, a great portion of how fantastic this character is can be attributed to Timothy Watson's incredible delivery and energy. You can just tell he's having an absolute blast in the recording booth. Here's just a small sample of some of my personal favorite lines of his.
Come on! I ain't that stupid.
Ravage the home!
I love this body! The power! My claws slid right through her soft flesh, like a hot knife through butter!
Look at this, metal brain!
Let it, Grandpa!
Running out of ideas here.
It's this brilliant concoction of goofiness and intimidation accentuated by a level of intensity that makes him so memorable. Think about it. Malos is certainly loved because he has deep desires and challenges the morals of the characters on a frequent basis. But what do I see most frequently when people talk about him?
Don't get cocky, you little shit. See you later, partner. Shit! Indeed!
I'm seeing the wide selection of ham on display in the deli section. Both of these villains steal the scenes they are in and chew the scenery, which is an expression used commonly in film and theater to refer to a performance rife with melodrama and overacting. That might sound bad, but Malos and Metalface are shining examples that it does work. Yes, I would argue that a goal of Xenoblade's narratives is to immerse the player, but it's secondary to entertaining the audience, and I find their brand of camp doesn't shatter the established boundaries of the respective worlds. Yet they showcase their campiness in different manners. Malos does some terrible things, but something about his actions feel less personal to me than Metalface's. Malos as a character is very complex, but Malos' goals ultimately are to eradicate humanity and follow Jin's wishes of killing the Architect. Yeah, I'd say killing every person is pretty bad, but Rex's party isn't the target of his malice. They just happen to fall under the umbrella. As for the Architect, they're an entity the main party has practically no connections to, while Metalface wants to torture Dunban, a main party member, and kill him as well as anyone around him. Similar to Malos from Torna, he's doing this for the fun of it, but in a more personal way since he confronts the player more over the course of that narrative. I want to give credit to the Japanese voice actor too, who is Norio Wakamoto. He has voiced Cell from Dragon Ball Z, another trash-talking character who I adore, if that wasn't a surprise. He does a solid job in the role, and both actors excel at different lines, but I gotta give it to Timothy Watson for going that extra mile. Speaking of the Japanese version of Metalface, I wonder what his name is in that language. Okay, let's see. Kuroi Feisu. Alright, and that translates to... Yeah, we're just gonna keep going. However, it gets even crazier because this character is still able to convey strong personality traits and motives without saying a single word. In Metalface's first appearance during the raid on Colony 9, he is completely silent. Some people have theorized that it's due to the stitches on his mouth, yet we've witnessed them present in the later appearance after the Ether Mine, so the primary reason I believe this decision was made was to keep Metalface's true identity of Mumkhar a secret for a little longer, since the player would have heard his voice in the prologue only a couple hours beforehand. Needless to say, good storytelling should not purely rely on dialogue, and Metalface's lack of speech contributes to his frightening presence. At this point in the story, Shulk has only used the Monado for a brief time. However, he's slicing through his opponents with absolute ease, something that even the legendary Dumban struggled with. So when the love child of Starscream and Zekrom decides it's his turn on the Xbox and crushes the hopeful heroes without uttering a word, yeah, that's kinda terrifying. The cheeky finger waggle when the Monado fails to cut his armor, the slight head turn when Dunban tries to fight him one-on-one as if he's saying, "Really?" And the way he casually tosses the wreckage holding Fiora's corpse while staring directly into the eyes of Dunban and Shulk, not a single word of dialogue. And yet he has solidified himself as arrogant, ruthless, and sadistic. It's rather interesting, but he practically permits the other variables around him, like the other characters and music, to fashion his significance within the narrative.
I'll kill you!
This is the shot that made him a force to be reckoned with. One point that I believe that is especially important to address is that Mumkhar is mostly a static character, one who remains largely the same throughout the narrative. But he is an exceptional one at that. In my opinion, an effective static character should be able to stand freely with the basis they've been provided, but they should also influence and direct other characters within the plot. I've been talking about Dragon Ball Z a ton in this video, but for very good reason, as Goku is an excellent model. Goku is a good-natured character driven by a single desire for fights that test his limit. There are situations that test his patience, but he's usually unwavering. Then you have someone like Vegeta, the fan favorite and one with some of the most development across the entire series, and a lot of that is thanks to Goku. His development in the earlier sagas as well as his regression in the Buu saga are thanks to his interactions with Goku. So, without Goku, there's no Vegeta. So how does this relate to Metalface? Well, he makes his mark in the narrative early on, but he doesn't stop there. He put Shulk, Ryan, and Dumban on a course at the beginning of the story, but at Prison Island, he changes the destiny of yet another character. Following his incapacitation by Saurian, we're presented with one of my favorite shots of the game where an out-of-focus Metalface slowly comes to, as denoted by the slight twitches and the red lights fading back into view. With Saurian revealing that he truly loved his daughter before passing away, Shulk pulls Melia onto this path of revenge in a way that echoes his own pain. Although Melia has shown desire for justice with the death of her guards at the hands of the Leon Telefia, her delivery here denotes less of a desire for the safety of her people, but of personal gain, which is evident in some of her future interactions with Metalface. His words and demeanor at Valak Mountain are also the reason that Dunban is sent into a frenzy, which we'll also get to later. Tying into his presence within the game, I'd say that another boon for Metalface is that he is the most iconic villain of Xenoblade Chronicles. I actually don't find this conclusion to be too crazy, and that's for several reasons. First, the name Egil isn't uttered until a side cutscene on the Mechonis side of things when the party reaches the Bionis interior, and Zanza isn't name-dropped until Prison Island. Seeing each of them doesn't happen until even further, which means that the main villain the player and characters are dealing with for practically half of the narrative is Metalface. Even beyond his in-game presence, let's take a look at Metalface from a marketing perspective. I went back and watched most, if not all, of the English Xenoblade Chronicles trailers for the original release, 3D, and Definitive Edition to see how long each of the main villains appeared. For clarification, I decided to strictly use their on-screen appearances rather than voice lines, since most new players aren't going to be able to associate a random voice with a character, especially if they are used asynchronously. I also decided to not use Mumkhar's appearances here in line with my own rule on visual appearances, since most new players also might not connect the two based on the trailer. This is not a perfect system, but it helps illustrate the picture, and with those stipulations out of the way, here are the numbers, and they're kind of what you would expect. In third place, we have Zanza with an averaged 3 seconds of screen time coming from the spoilerific Wii and 3DS trailers. Next up is Egil with practically 8 seconds of screen time that is mainly attributed to Yaldabaoth, but he did have a fair number of voice lines across the spread of trailers. Finally, we have Metalface with a whopping 45 seconds of screen time, in addition to a handful of voice lines. Most of his appearances can be traced back to the assault on Colony 9, as well as the cutscene where Fiora dies, which apparently is a damn good way to grab a player's attention not only within the game itself, but via promotional means. It might also be obvious that yeah, they would prefer to primarily show early game content over late game spoilers in these trailers, thus giving Metalface more of the spotlight. However, that doesn't diminish the achieved end result of his status. The final testament to Metalface's status as the most iconic villain is his outreach beyond Xenoblade Chronicles. Metalface has guest starred in both the Super Smash Bros. Series as well as Project Cross Zone 2. In this 3DS RPG, he appears as an enemy several times across the game for the player to battle. In the former, Metalface is a stage hazard on Gaur Plains with a surprisingly high quantity of voice lines, some of which only occur if Shulk is in the match. In addition, Mumkhar and Metalface are both spirits in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, with the Homs leveling up into his metallic incarnation after reaching level 100. He is the only Xenoblade Chronicles 1 villain to appear in Super Smash Bros., as well as in any outside property in any capacity. With all of this being said, I believe the conclusion that Metalface is the most recognized and relevant villain in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is rather logical, but just because a character is seen does not mean they are necessarily effective. It's all of those qualities of narrative presence, captivating energy, and great design I mentioned that create the compelling character he is. Now that I've gushed over Metalface for an excessive amount of time, I want to address some of the criticisms I typically see surrounding his character. One of the most consistent criticisms I hear leveraged at Metalface is that he is a simple character and lacks the complexity of his Xenoblade Chronicles 1 counterpart Egil, or that Xenoblade Chronicles 2's Malos does the hamminess better while also being thought-provoking. Now, if someone prefers more layered characters over those with clear-cut ambitions, that's completely reasonable. But to call these types of villains ineffective, I find that to be misinformed. I think it's crucial to draw a distinction between what are someone's subjective tastes and what actually does not work in the confines of a narrative, because I oftentimes hear numerous people plainly state X is bad or bro, Y is garbage as kind of a catch-all, while ignoring that, yeah, there is a difference. In that respect, I believe Metalface serves his role in the narrative marvelously and is an incredibly effective character. Metalface really has two overarching goals in mind: to best Dunban and to get his hands on the Monado, and both of these objectives do feed into one another. However, since Metalface's identity is hidden from the player in the game's first half, this actually makes his writing rather clever. Let's examine this chronologically. Mumkhar in the Battle of Sword Valley boasts, "I'll just come and get the Monado when everything's quiet down a bit. That thing's gonna be mine." So within the first 10 minutes, we know Mumkhar's motivations at the very least. Well, the game also tries to play it off like he either got eaten or something terrible, but regardless, his character is taken out of the picture with an established goal: get the Monado for himself. While donning the Metalface persona, Mumkhar actually drops any mention of wanting the Monado until the encounter with him at the base of Valak Mountain, when he growls, "I can't tell you how badly I've wanted this sword." I think the basic understanding is that the revival of this motivation comes out just in time for the reappearance of his Homs body, almost to say he's held on to this desire for all this time. And now that we've seen his Homs form, hey, that motivation is back. Some people might find that cheap, but I find this impeccably well written. Think about it. In the game's beginning, the greatest level of power Mumkhar has witnessed is the Monado as it cuts through opponents with ease. Yet Metalface is given this new robust body, one that he himself states he loves because of the newfound power given to him. Yet, more importantly, it's a form of power that is capable of eclipsing what he had previously acknowledged as the number one spot, since the Monado is unable to cut through his faced armor, with few exceptions of course. So here we have a character who has just been given the keys to something which he believes topples the power hierarchy he previously knew. How would that make someone act who is driven by prestige and power? Well, they'd likely view that previous object of desire as a mere trinket and become self-absorbed in their perceived ascendancy, and that's Mumkhar to a T. The assault on Colony 9 was the test drive of sorts, personally doling out carnage with the death of his rival sister and effortlessly swatting away his adversaries. Think back to the Battle of Sword Valley, where Mumkhar and the other Homs were fighting for their lives to survive the endless onslaught. And now, he's back again on the battlefield, but receiving only minor wounds because of his new body, which would further hypnotize him under this power trip. This raid feeds into his arrogance and acts as the fuel to the future encounters with him, where he constantly torments Shulk and the party up until the fiasco at Prison Island. With the upgraded Monado, Shulk is able to slice through Metalface like a hot knife through butter, shattering not only his armor, but the power fantasy he became drunk on. Faced Mechon were no longer at the forefront. The Monado had reclaimed its former status, and that does not go unnoticed. And this brings us back to Valak Mountain, where he once again states his desire for the Monado. The resurgence of Mumkhar's pursuit isn't merely because his humanoid form has re-entered the narrative, but because he's beginning to realize he's no longer on top, even if he still adores his new metallic body. Mumkhar's goal with the Monado has always been to become the new hero, the member of the Homs who earn the admiration and respect of all those around him. But he essentially represents a dark alternate timeline. What if someone that wasn't as collected as Dunban, but as self-centered as Mumkhar, did serve as a champion among his people? I'd like to think the Metalface transformation brings that out of him when he demands Dunban to get on his knees and worship him. Is Metalface as mentally stimulating as other villains? No, but that's not what his purpose is, and even then I think there's more depth to his character than people give him credit for. Like I said, Metalface is pure, unadulterated fun, and that's where it counts. Another criticism I see, albeit not nearly as often, is that his death lacks satisfaction given everything he's done over the first half of the narrative. I will admit that I agreed with this sentiment during my initial playthrough, but I came to realize that this was the perfect way for him to die. Does Dunban deliver the final blow and get revenge for the act that set Shulk, Ryan, and him on this journey in the first place? No, but that's also not where Shulk's at mentally. He wishes to satisfy his cravings for answers rather than revenge at this point, and Dunban has succumbed to that same poisonous mindset Shulk had up until the events of Prison Island. Just one life is all it takes for inner peace. That's what he tells himself. But will that bring back Fiora? Could Dunban execute this corrupted Homs if this was his own sister instead? Dunban has the strength to recognize his limits, but Mumkhar doesn't, and it's these that I believe make Mumkhar's self-inflicted death warranted. I think it's the perfect blend of irony and camp that fits his character as he descends into the abyss with the appropriate and slightly humorous, "not like this." Certainly, the greater Xeno series is no stranger to character archetypes being reused, but even Metalface found a successor in the form of Gort from Torn of the Golden Country. This is a whole discussion on its own, but I feel that Gort is a rather forgettable villain despite following a very solid blueprint of a human-turned monster holding onto a shred of their former humanity. This could be attributed to Gort's diminished story presence and his lack of Metalface's charisma, even if both are repugnant beings. But obviously this means you can't just rely on characters' conceptual plans to make them effective. It lies in the application, and that speaks volumes to how well executed Metalface is. At the end of the day, Metalface might not be everybody's cup of tea, but hopefully I could shed light on why I believe he's an outstanding villain as well as my favorite one in the series. He's cold and sadistic, but curiously charismatic and lovable with his larger-than-life performance and mannerisms. The assault on Colony 9, the Prison Island battle, the redemption of Dunban at Sword Valley, he's an integral component in their success. Metalface is a great part of why I love Xenoblade Chronicles so much. Not just the first game, but the entire series, and why I also have so much hope for the villains of the future. Hello everyone, and welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I realize that I have not done a Xenoblade Chronicles 1 focus video in practically a year, maybe year and a half at this point, which that's kind of crazy, so here we are. I know I've touched on Metalface several times, but like I said, I really wanted to give him his own dedicated video because he deserves it. If you did end up enjoying this video though and would like to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, it'd be very much appreciated. We're just shy of hitting 12k on the channel, and honestly with Xenoblade Chronicles free, I think it's possible to hit 15k by the end of the year, so I mean, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But anyways, I'm actually off here for about 2 months, which is pretty exciting, and I'm going to be able to stream a couple projects I've wanted to, as well as make some more videos, so look forward to that. Anyways, that's really all I have to say for now, so thank you guys, as always, for watching the video and all the support and love. It really does mean the world to me. And until next time.